3 years ago, I stood in front of a military tribunal and told them exactly what I saw. I was honest. I was thorough. I was the only witness they had. And because of my testimony, a good soldier's career ended in disgrace, while I got offered a promotion and a transfer to stay quiet about the whole thing. I refused both. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that my testimony had destroyed the one man who was trying to prevent something far worse than friendly fire, something that would haunt me every single day for the rest of my life. My name is Captain David Morrison, and this is the story of how doing the right thing became the worst mistake I ever made. It started in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, September 2021. I was a lieutenant then, attached to a Marine infantry unit running security operations in a valley that had seen more violence in 2 decades than most places see in a century. Our job was straightforward: patrol the villages, build relationships with local leaders, gather intelligence, and keep the Taliban from regaining control after the announced withdrawal. The heat was brutal that September, the kind that makes your gear feel like it weighs twice as much and turns your uniform into a second skin of sweat-soaked fabric. I'd been in country for 7 months, and I still wasn't used to it. Some guys adapted, some guys thrived. I just endured. Our unit operated out of the small combat outpost, really just a collection of HESCO barriers and plywood buildings, about 6 clicks from the nearest village. 23 Marines, 3 Navy corpsmen, and me. We ran patrols every other day, sometimes more if intelligence suggested Taliban movement in the area. Staff Sergeant Webb led 2nd Squad. He was 34, on his 5th deployment, and the kind of Marine that recruitment posters tried to capture but never quite managed. Quiet, competent, respected. He had this way of reading terrain that bordered on supernatural. He'd stop a patrol, stare at a section of road for 30 seconds, and wave everyone around it. 9 times out of 10, we'd find an IED buried exactly where he'd indicated. The guys loved him. Command trusted him, and I thought I knew him. I was wrong. The incident happened on a Tuesday. We were running a joint patrol with Afghan National Army forces, 4 of their soldiers, 6 of ours, 2 vehicles. Standard presence patrol through 3 villages along the valley floor. Intelligence said the area was clear, but intelligence said a lot of things that turned out to be optimistic at best. We'd cleared 2 villages without incident when we got a call from our outpost. Possible Taliban scouts spotted near a compound about 2 clicks northeast of our position. Command wanted us to check it out before we headed back. The compound sat isolated on a hillside, accessible by a single dirt road that switchbacked up from the valley. Not unusual for the region, but the location made me uncomfortable. Too exposed, too many sightlines from higher ground. The kind of place that made the back of your neck itch. Webb must have felt it too. He was quieter than usual as we approached, his eyes constantly scanning the ridgelines above us. The A&A soldiers seemed unconcerned, laughing about something in Dari as their truck bounced over the rutted road. The compound was small, a main building, 2 smaller structures, a walled courtyard. No movement visible from the road. Webb called for everyone to hold position while he and I moved forward to make contact. We dismounted and approached on foot. The compound's gate stood open, which immediately felt wrong. In that region, gates stayed closed, always. "Lieutenant," Webb said quietly, "something's off here. I see it. We should call this in, wait for backup." I should have listened. That's the part that keeps me awake some nights. I should have listened to the man with 5 deployments and a decade of combat experience. But I was young and by the book, and Command wanted that compound checked before sunset. "We're already here. Let's take a look." Webb's jaw tightened, but he nodded. We entered the courtyard with weapons raised, moving in practiced tandem. The main building's door was also open. The silence felt heavy, pregnant with something I couldn't name. That's when I heard voices from inside. Multiple people, speaking in Pashto. Too many voices for a normal family, too aggressive in tone. Webb heard it too. He held up a hand, signaling me to stop, but I was already moving toward the doorway. Training said to identify threats. Training said to gather intelligence. Training said a lot of things that made sense in classroom scenarios. I reached the doorway and peered inside. What I saw has been dissected in 3 separate investigations, 2 tribunals, and countless debriefing sessions. But in that moment, I only registered fragments. 5 Afghan men in a room, 2 ANA uniforms among them, weapons stacked against a wall, maps spread across a table, and Marcus Webb entering behind me, his weapon coming up fast. Then, everything went loud. Webb fired 3 rounds. One of the ANA soldiers dropped. The others scattered, some reaching for weapons, others diving for cover. I was shouting. What? I don't remember. Webb was shouting too, ordering them down, weapon trained on the remaining ANA soldier. The Afghans were screaming. One was returning fire. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, muzzle flashes bright in the dim interior. I fired twice, center mass on the shooter. He went down. The remaining ANA soldier reached for his sidearm. Webb fired once. The soldier collapsed. 12 seconds. That's how long the entire engagement lasted, according to the investigation. 12 seconds that ended 2 careers, destroyed my faith in doing the right thing, and set in motion events I'm still trying to understand. The shooting stopped. The silence afterward was worse than the gunfire. I stood there, ears ringing, watching 2 Afghan soldiers, our allies, lying motionless on the floor. The other Afghans had their hands up, faces pale with shock. "What the hell did you do?" I heard myself saying. Webb lowered his weapon. His hands were steady, his voice was calm. "Saving your life, sir." "Those were ANA, our guys." "Look at the table." I looked. The maps showed our outpost, our patrol routes, times and locations marked in precise detail, written in English. Before I could process what I was seeing, our radio squawked. The rest of the patrol was calling in, hearing the shots, requesting status. I had to make a decision. I made the wrong one. "Contact with hostile forces," I reported. 2 enemy killed in action. Compound secure." Webb stared at me. "Sir, that's not—" "We'll sort this out back at base," I cut him off. "Right now we need to secure this site and get these detainees back for questioning." Now here's where everything changed. But real quick, if you're invested in how this ends, I'd genuinely appreciate a subscription. More soldier stories drop daily. Comment your country below. Always amazes me how far these reach. The next 72 hours turned into a bureaucratic nightmare. The dead ANA soldiers had been part of a unit we'd been working with for months. Their commander demanded answers. Our command demanded answers. CID descended on our outpost like locusts, interviewing everyone, photographing everything, bagging evidence. I told them what I saw. Webb entering the compound behind me, seeing Afghan soldiers and opening fire without warning or provocation. Friendly fire, a terrible mistake made worse by the confusion of the moment. I was detailed, I was precise. I was the only American witness to the actual shooting, and my account painted Marcus Webb as a soldier who'd lost control and taken 2 lives without justification. Webb's version was different. He claimed the ANA soldiers were meeting with Taliban sympathizers, planning an attack on our outpost. He claimed he'd identified them reaching for weapons. He claimed it was a righteous engagement against genuine threats. But he couldn't prove it. The maps could have been innocuous. Local forces coordinated with us all the time. The other Afghans detained at the scene claimed they were just laborers, in the wrong place at the wrong time. The weapons in the room were registered to the ANA unit, perfectly legitimate. And I'd already reported it as hostile forces on the radio, then changed my story in the formal investigation. The Corps doesn't forgive inconsistent accounts. They especially don't forgive them from officers who should know better. 3 days after the incident, I was called to meet with Colonel Brennan, our battalion commander. He was old Corps, 3 deployments to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan, the kind of officer who'd come up through enlisted ranks and never forgot it. "Lieutenant Morrison," he said when I entered his office, "close the door." I did. "I've read your statement, I've read Staff Sergeant Webb's statement, I've read the preliminary CID report." He leaned back in his chair. "You know what strikes me as interesting? Sir, your story is cleaner than his, more straightforward, easier to believe." Pause. "Almost too easy." My stomach dropped. "I reported what I saw, sir." "I'm sure you did, but sometimes what we see isn't the whole picture." He pulled out a folder. "We've been running intelligence on that compound for 6 weeks. We had reason to believe it was being used as a staging point for an attack. Then why wasn't I briefed? Because you weren't read in on the operation. Staff Sergeant Webb was. He opened the folder. He was tasked with confirming our intelligence. What you walked into was him executing that mission. I felt cold, despite the heat. He didn't tell me. He wasn't authorized to, and now he can't, because if he does, he compromises an ongoing operation and violates classification protocols. Brennan closed the folder. So here's what's going to happen. CID will complete their investigation. They'll find insufficient evidence to prosecute Webb for anything criminal, but his career is effectively over. Article 15 at minimum, probably worse. He'll be sent stateside, administratively separated, and that will be the end of it. Sir, if he was acting on orders... He wasn't, not officially. The mission was deniable. That's the point. Brennan's expression hardened. What I'm offering you is a way to make this go away. You amend your statement, say the situation was confusing, you may have misread Webb's actions. CID will accept the revised version, Webb gets reprimanded but keeps his career, and you get transferred to a training command stateside with a promotion to captain on the way. I stared at him. You want me to lie? I want you to be less certain about things you saw in a chaotic situation. And if I don't? Then Webb goes down for friendly fire. You get flagged as an officer with questionable judgment for how you reported the incident initially, and the Corps loses 2 good men over something that should never have happened in the first place. I went back to my quarters and sat in the dark for 3 hours. By the book, Webb had fired on friendly forces without my authorization. By the book, my testimony was accurate. By the book, I had done nothing wrong. The book doesn't prepare you for moments like this. I thought about Webb's record, 5 deployments, dozens of successful missions, a file full of commendations. I thought about my own career just starting, the weight of a decision that would follow me forever. I thought about what was right. In the end, I chose what I believed was integrity. I refused to change my statement. I told Colonel Brennan that I'd reported what I saw and I wouldn't modify it to make anyone's life easier, including my own. He looked at me like I'd just shot myself in the foot. You're making a mistake, Lieutenant. Maybe, sir, but it's mine to make. The tribunal convened 3 weeks later. Webb was formally charged with negligent homicide and violation of rules of engagement. I testified for 2 hours, walking them through every second of what happened. Webb's defense attorney tried to shake my account but couldn't. I'd seen what I'd seen. Webb never looked at me during my testimony. He sat there, jaw set, eyes forward, while I systematically dismantled his career with the truth. The tribunal found him guilty of negligent handling of his weapon and dereliction of duty, not criminal charges, but career-ending ones. He was reduced in rank, given a general discharge, and sent home in disgrace. I turned down the promotion, stayed at my current rank, requested a transfer to any unit that would take me. 3 months later, I was stateside, assigned to a logistics battalion in North Carolina. Not quite a punishment, but everyone knew what it meant. I was the officer who'd refused to play ball, the one who'd chosen principle over pragmatism, the one who'd destroyed Marcus Webb. I tried to move on, did my job, kept my head down, told myself I'd done the right thing even when other officers avoided me in the hallway and Webb's friends from our unit stopped answering my emails. Before I tell you what I found in that envelope, if you're hooked on this story, hit that like button and subscribe. There are dozens more voices like mine here. And drop a comment with your country. I'm curious where all of you are listening from. That might have been the end of it, except I couldn't let it go. Something about the whole thing felt unfinished, like a sentence cut off mid-thought. I started reading everything I could find about our unit's operations in Helmand that deployment. After-action reports, intelligence summaries, incident logs. Most of it was routine, patrols, engagements, relationships with local forces. But I started noticing patterns in the reports from the weeks leading up to the incident. Small things: a patrol that deviated from its planned route with no explanation, an intelligence report about Taliban activity that seemed oddly specific, a mention of a compound matching the description of where the shooting happened, flagged as requiring further investigation, and repeatedly one name: Staff Sergeant Webb, submitting spot reports about unusual ANA movements. I requested access to the classified portions of our deployment records. Got denied. Requested again through different channels. Denied. Started asking questions to people who'd been there, trying to piece together what intelligence Webb might have had access to.
Nobody would talk to me, not directly, but one former sergeant from our unit, a guy named Collins who'd rotated stateside before the incident, agreed to meet me for coffee 6 months after I'd gotten back. "You really don't know, do you?" he said after I explained what I was looking for. "Know what?" Collins looked around the coffee shop like he expected CID to burst through the door. Webb wasn't just running regular patrols, he was tracking something, someone. He'd figured out that some of our ANA partners were planning to hit our outpost. The maps in the compound were proof. Webb had been building a case for weeks, feeding intelligence up the chain, waiting for authorization to act. But Washington didn't want an incident with our Afghan partners, not that close to withdrawal, so they kept telling him to collect more evidence, be more certain, wait for the right moment. Then what happened? You happened, Lieutenant. You walked into that compound before Webb could properly secure it, before he could separate the collaborators from the regulars, before he had backup in position. Collins's expression was hard. He made a choice: save you or maintain operational security. He chose you. I felt like I'd been punched. Why didn't anyone tell me this? Because if you'd known, you'd have been complicit in an off-book operation. Webb protected you by keeping you out of it, and when you testified against him, you protected yourself even more. He stood up. "I got nothing else to say to you." He walked out. I sat there for another hour, coffee going cold, trying to process it. Everything I'd believed about that day, everything I'd testified to under oath, had been missing this context. Webb hadn't fired on friendly forces. He'd fired on infiltrators who were planning to attack us. But I still didn't have proof, just the word of a former sergeant who had his own reasons to be bitter about how our deployment ended. I needed more. I spent the next year pursuing it. I filed Freedom of Information Act requests. I contacted journalists who covered Afghanistan. I reached out to other members of our unit, most of whom refused to speak with me. The few who did couldn't or wouldn't provide details. Then, 14 months after my testimony, I received a manila envelope at my apartment. No return address, postmarked from Virginia. Inside was a thumb drive and a handwritten note. "You wanted the truth. Here it is, but some truths don't set you free." The thumb drive contained classified intelligence reports from our deployment, reports I'd never seen, reports that painted a very different picture of what was happening in Helmand Province in the months before the incident. Webb had been right. The ANA soldiers in that compound were collaborators working with a Taliban cell planning a coordinated attack on 3 coalition outposts, including ours. The attack was scheduled for late September 2021, timed to maximize casualties and embarrass coalition forces before the final withdrawal. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what the intelligence showed about the attack itself. The collaborators weren't just planning to hit our outpost. They were planning to do it during a visit from congressional staffers who were touring forward positions. The attack would have resulted in not just military casualties, but civilian ones, Americans who'd come to see the situation firsthand, who would have been killed in what would have looked like a massive intelligence failure. The political fallout would have been catastrophic, and Webb had been trying to stop it. The reports showed he'd identified the plot 3 weeks before my testimony. He'd submitted intel briefs. He'd requested authorization to act. Each time he was told to wait, to collect more evidence, to coordinate with Afghan authorities who might themselves have been compromised. He was watching the clock run down, watching the attack date get closer, and nobody was listening. So when I walked into that compound, when I put myself directly in the middle of his operation without knowing it, he made a choice: stop the threat immediately, even if it meant ending his career. The ANA soldiers in that room were about to be extracted by their Taliban handlers. If Webb had waited for proper authorization, for backup, for any of the things he should have done, they'd have slipped away. The attack would have proceeded, Americans would have been lost, and it would have been on his conscience. I read through every document twice, then a third time. The picture was clear and damning, and I'd missed all of it because I'd been too focused on what I'd seen with my own eyes to consider what I hadn't seen. I'd destroyed the career of a man who'd saved lives, including, probably, mine. The question was what to do about it.
If I came forward with classified documents I wasn't authorized to possess, I'd be admitting to a security violation. I'd face prosecution. My career would end just like Webb's had. But if I stayed silent, Webb's name would never be cleared. He'd live the rest of his life branded as a soldier who'd compromised friendly forces, who'd let his finger get too fast on the trigger, who'd ended 2 lives out of panic or poor judgment. I spent a week trying to verify the documents independently. I confirmed dates, cross-referenced with unclassified reports, checked signatures. Everything looked legitimate. Whoever sent me this information had access to compartmented intelligence and was willing to risk serious prison time to get it to me. Now here's where everything changed. But real quick, if you're invested in how this ends, I'd genuinely appreciate a subscription. More soldier stories drop daily. Comment your country below. Always amazes me how far these reach. I finally tracked down Webb's address. He was living in a small town in Montana, working construction. I drove 18 hours straight to get there, rehearsing what I'd say the entire way. The house was modest, set back from the road with a view of mountains in the distance. I knocked on the door at sunset. Webb answered, saw me, and his expression went carefully neutral. "Captain Morrison." "I'm not here in any official capacity," I said. "I just need to talk to you." He considered for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." The interior was sparse but clean. Pictures of Marines on one wall, his old units, his friends, a bookshelf full of military history. No pictures of family. Webb had been married once. His wife had filed for divorce 2 months after his discharge. We sat in his living room. I pulled out a folder with printouts from the thumb drive. "I received classified documents about Helmand, about the operation you were running, about what those ANA soldiers were planning." Webb's expression didn't change. And I think you were right. About everything. They were collaborators. They were planning an attack. You stopped it. I pushed the folder toward him. "I testified against you without knowing any of this. I destroyed your career over something you did to save lives." He glanced at the documents, but didn't touch them. "Who sent you those?" "I don't know." "Someone wants you to know the truth. Question is why?" "Because it's the truth. Because you deserve to have your name cleared." "And how do you plan to do that? Take those documents to your chain of command? Admit you're in possession of classified materials you're not authorized to have?" Webb shook his head. "You'd be confessing to a security violation. They'd prosecute you. Your career would be over." "I know. So why are you here?" I didn't have a good answer for that. "I need to make this right." Webb was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "You really think clearing my name matters anymore? I'm out. My marriage is gone. My career is gone. Most of my friends won't return my calls because they think I lost control and got people ended. What exactly would making this public accomplish?" "Justice." "Justice." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Justice would have been someone listening to me before that day. Justice would have been proper authorization to act. Justice would have been you trusting me in that compound instead of second-guessing every decision I made. He stood up. But that's not what happened, and justice doesn't work backward. I can file a formal request for review of the tribunal findings. With these documents, With those documents, you'll go to prison for mishandling classified information. And even if you don't, even if you somehow clear my name, it won't give me back what I lost. It'll just be a footnote in a file nobody reads. He walked to the door. I appreciate you coming here. I do. But there's nothing you can do for me now that would make any difference. I have to try. Why? To make yourself feel better about what you did? His voice had an edge now. You testified to what you saw. You were honest in the moment. The fact that you didn't have all the information isn't your fault. It's the system's fault. It's the fault of everyone who knew what was happening and decided operational security was more important than backing up their people. You don't blame me? I blame a lot of people, Captain. You're pretty far down the list. He opened the door. Go home. Move on with your career. Learn from this, but don't try to fix it. Some things stay broken. I left Montana with the documents still in my folder and no clarity about what to do next. Webb's words echoed the entire drive back. Some things stay broken.
I spent 3 more months wrestling with it. I consulted with a military attorney off the record about what would happen if I came forward. The answer was clear. I'd face prosecution for mishandling classified information, possible espionage charges depending on how aggressive the investigation got, and definitely the end of my career. And it might not even clear Webb's name. The documents could be dismissed as fabricated or obtained through illegal means. The original tribunal findings would stand. All I'd accomplish would be destroying my own future. In the end, I made my choice. I submitted a formal request for review of Staff Sergeant Webb's case, citing concerns about incomplete information available at the original tribunal. I didn't mention the classified documents. I didn't admit to possessing any unauthorized materials. I simply argued that new information had come to light that suggested the engagement should be re-examined. The request was denied within 2 weeks. Insufficient grounds for review. Case closed. I tried going to the press. 2 journalists showed initial interest but backed away when they couldn't independently verify what I was telling them. Without the classified documents, which I couldn't legally provide, it was just my word against the official record. Webb had been right. Some things stay broken. 6 months ago, I resigned my commission. I'd made captain by then, but it felt hollow. Every time I put on the uniform, I thought about Webb in that compound, making an impossible choice. Every time someone thanked me for my service, I thought about the man who'd actually saved lives and got punished for it. I work civilian security now. The pay is better, and the moral complexity is less exhausting. I haven't spoken to Webb since that day in Montana. I don't know if he'd want to hear from me anyway. But I think about him every day. I think about the truth I helped bury. I think about the congressional staffers who lived because of what he did, people who'll never know how close they came to being casualties in a war that was already supposed to be over. I think about integrity and what it really means. I'd always believed it meant telling the truth no matter the cost. But the truth turns out to be more complicated than what your eyes see in a moment of chaos. I testified honestly about what I witnessed. I refused to change my account to protect careers or make political problems go away. I did everything I was supposed to do, and I was wrong about all of it. The classified documents are still in a safe in my apartment. I haven't destroyed them because some part of me hopes that someday, somehow, they'll matter. That there'll be a moment when revealing them actually accomplishes something beyond satisfying my own need for redemption. But I'm not holding my breath. Webb saved my life and probably dozens of others.
He sacrificed his career to stop an attack that would have been catastrophic, and history will remember him as a soldier who lost control and took 2 lives without justification. That's on me. I see his face sometimes in quiet moments, the expression he had sitting across from me in Montana. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. The look of a man who'd made peace with injustice because fighting it would only cause more damage. Maybe that's the real lesson here, that doing the right thing isn't always clear in the moment, that integrity sometimes means accepting you were wrong, that truth has layers and the one you see depends entirely on where you're standing when you look. I stood in the wrong place. I saw the wrong truth, and by the time I understood what had really happened, it was too late to matter. I learned that some truths don't set you free. They just give you something new to carry, every day, for the rest of your life.